So, what's the biggest internal struggle that you are seeing people face?
Leadership grows when people learn to see themselves the way others experience them.
Welcome back to the LoopLynks Show. We have Mr. KV Premraj. What do you feel, sir, about being calm in such situations where you feel a certain amount of pressure?
See, pressure is where leadership character becomes visible.
Welcome back to the LoopLynks Show, where we bring you conversations with leaders who don't just build careers, but shape the way decisions are made. Today's guest has spent over 2 decades in banking, an environment where decisions are rarely about just numbers. They carry consequences, real consequences, often far beyond what's visible on paper. We have Mr. KV Premraj, who has led through that reality, balancing targets, risk, people, and time pressure, all the while developing a leadership philosophy grounded not just in theory, but in actual lived experience. This is a conversation about judgment, about responsibility, and what it really means to lead when the stakes are all too real. Well, Ms. Premraj, thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to start with something very basic, sir. Um, People often associate leadership with frameworks and business models, but you've spent a lot of years in an environment where decisions directly affect people's lives. Is that correct so far, sir?
Yes, sir. That's true.
Oh, okay. Well, sir, I was just curious to know, what did banking, the actual experience of being in that structure, teach you about leadership that just mere theory never could?
Many, many years ago, when I was a young banker, a shop owner walked into my branch
Okay.
asking for a modest loan. The paperwork was ordinary, the numbers were small, nothing dramatic. But I still remember what he said before leaving my room. Sir, if this happens, my son will stay in school. At that moment, I realized something very powerful. For me, it was just a file. For him, it was a future. That day, I understood that banking is not really only about money, it's about human consequences. And as a leader in such an environment, it carries the responsibilities that textbooks will never expose a person to. In fact,
So,
this person whom I gave a loan many, many years ago, many decades ago, that shop is still in existence. Whenever I go past through that area, I look at the shop. It has grown to a much bigger setup, and I feel proud as because I've been able to make a difference to someone's life, not only to someone's life, to some family's life. That is what makes me very, very proud and satisfied.
well, that's profound. As a matter of fact, it's more about the human connect and the impact that you were able to create on even that one individual life that matters more than all else that is involved. Is that correct, sir? Okay. That's basically, quite a shift from seeing the numbers as just data to seeing them as real impact being made on people. I'm guessing this is that defining moment um, in your career where that responsibility about that the fact that you're dealing with people and you're impacting everyday lives that became more real for you. Can we safely assume that here?
Yes, that's true.
Right. So it's fascinating, you know, that sometimes a leadership in your role requires you to go against common consensus or maybe against the tide to a certain extent. So to that point, that completely changes leadership to basically social responsibility, not just mere popularity, numbers, spotlight, and all that. So, did that certain experience with that certain gentleman completely change how you approached decision making going forward in the rest of your life in the corporate world?
Yes, that's very, very true. The theory tells us what leadership is about frameworks.
Mhm.
But in real life, when judgments, banking teaches us leadership is about judgments when the stakes are really, really real. I remember sitting once in a branch reviewing some credit proposals when a colleague joked, "This is just a file." But I remember telling him, saying, behind these files, there could be family businesses, there could be employees, supplies, and people whose life depended on the outcome of what I would do with those files. So, over a period of time, I realized numbers are never just numbers, they always represent people. That awareness changes how a leader thinks. It's a responsibility for people that creates a ripple effect.
Well, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, sir. Absolutely. So, let me ask you this, sir. Banking is one of those environments where you've got constant pressure with targets, deadlines, expectations on a micro and a macro level. So, in those moments, what do you feel as a leader yourself that separates leaders who manage to stay steady as opposed to those who probably crumble or become reactive?
Let me share another example, a true life story that happened.
Mhm.
There was this large loan proposal that we had received. The numbers were acceptable. Everyone knew that if we had done this, we would be meeting our targets. But when I met the borrower, the would be borrower, I felt something was amiss. There was this gut feeling. So I did not go ahead with the proposal. I declined it, much to the disappointment of my colleagues. Because if we had done that proposal, our targets could have been achieved, or we would have been near achieving this target.
Okay.
And looking back on hindsight, that was a great decision because a couple of years down the line, we heard about the same borrower who had given the loan that I rejected, went to some other institution, he had taken the loan and he had defaulted there. So my gut feeling when I went against the grain of my people, against the judgment of my people, stood. And I was very happy that I did not compromise the institution wherein this loss would have been a big, big loss if I had allowed that loan to be processed and if it had gone bust. So this
Right.
lesson stayed with me. A leader's job is not to be liked in the moment, it is to protect the organizational interest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was some good, timely wisdom that you exhibited right there. And what do you feel, sir, about being calm in such situations where you feel a certain amount of pressure and you're just wondering what to do? How do you maintain overall how would you say this, emotional maturity, or just maintain your composure? Is there something specific that you rely on?
See, pressure is where leadership character becomes visible. I remember once it was a year end wherein there were a lot of pressure, and due to the pressure, people were cracking, including me.
Mhm.
I was feeling the pressure. That was when a senior leader stepped in and said, "Let's slow down." That calmness immediately changed the temperature in the room. So, steady leaders have some qualities like emotional discipline, clarity about priorities, and perspective. The calmest person in the room becomes the anchor where everyone subconsciously gravitates towards.
Right. Absolutely. I agree with that here. That's the calmest person in the room is probably the strongest link in that entire chain, like they say.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Yes.
do you feel that leaders today, there's so much growth happening, life in the fast lane with technology being so dynamic and everything. Do you feel that leaders sometimes today underestimate how their emotional state actually influences their teams? Like you said, causes a ripple effect. Do you feel that, that's not considered, has to be a major part of management and leadership today?
Yes, it does. Because money sometimes amplifies emotions. When finances are involved, fear, ambition, insecurity, and ego all show up in the same room at the same time. I remember once a negotiation completely getting derailed because two very capable people were arguing with each other. They stuck to their guns. And because each one was not able to look at the bigger picture or the larger picture, they were having conflicts. So it's about many times just calming down, trying to understand the bigger picture and not your small ego that really helps. It said that soft skills are actually hard leadership assets.
Do you feel that humility is a virtue that is severely downplayed in the corporate world and in the emerging world today? Is that a virtue that's not being considered to be valuable?
Yes, that's very true.
Absolutely.
I'm not
So,
going to learn on that front.
okay, okay, absolutely. Uh, we see that in everyday life, when egos clash and people want to have the last word, and completely ignoring team or organizational objectives. I really feel that humility could go a long way, getting that more perfect collaboration between people towards one common objective. That definitely is a virtue that should be more pursued, I would say. So you say you've spoken about leadership, presence and about soft skills, especially in the financial services industry and financial environments. Why do you think these matter even more, when money and performance are involved?
See what happens in an organization, and especially in the banking things, when we have targets, achievement of those targets lead to your promotions and bonuses and other financial incentives. So when this happens, there is a tendency to cut corners. You see a lot of mis-selling that we talk about in the banking sector. That happens primarily because large targets are foisted on people, and people somehow or the other forget a bit about ethics, forget a bit about the customers at the other end, and for short-term gains, they cut corners and not reveal everything to the customer. And in the final analysis, what happens is there's a lot of mis-selling that happens, which this person who does the selling may not be when the final result happens. With attrition and people moving around, a person sells some product to a customer, and then he vacates the place. A couple of years down the line, when that policy matures or when it comes for redemption, the customer feels that he is shortchanged. And somehow or the other, that ethical responsibility or ethical selling that has to happen doesn't seem to be happening very often, which is a very sad fact. And this is what leaders need to really harp on and impress upon people with whom they are working. Because if you try to shortchange a customer once, that might succeed, but the word will spread out. And not only will the name of the person get tarnished, but the institutional image also gets tarnished.
Absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Integrity sure goes a long way in building and sustaining reputation. Yes, sir, absolutely. Because so I could probably say that leadership is not just about just solving problems at hand, but also largely the emotional context in which those problems exist. So have you seen firsthand situations where lack of such awareness about such virtues actually caused things to break down for any institution or a bank or someplace?
Yeah, yeah, I can relate one incident that happened in one of the branches that was reporting to me. There was this person with whom the other staff members were not getting along. It was a small team, just half a dozen people. And this one person was creating an issue, is what was reported, whether not coming to work on time or not finishing the work or making false promises to customers. So one day when I visited this branch, the branch manager requested me to have a word with that person. So I called that person, got into a room, and then when I initially started the conversation, she was a bit uh, flustered and she tried to defend herself, trying to blame the others, saying the others were not really interested in helping her out or interested in working together. They were the problem rather than her. So after some time, I felt there was something amiss. So I asked him, is there something which, some personal problem which you are grappling with, which unfortunately is coming into the official world, in coming in, which is due to which your work is suffering? For a moment, she did not say anything. She looked at me. I looked at her. Then I told her, what are you to tell me? This will stay within the four walls of this room. Once again, she looked at me. As I could feel, she was trying to debate whether she could trust me. Then I told her once again, whatever you tell me will remain in this room and I will try to help you. First, one tear dropped out. Then she started crying profusely. Between sobs, she revealed she was a single mother with an 8-year-old school going kid. Money was hard to come by. And on top of that, she had a mother who was battling fourth stage of cancer. With all these problems at home, she was coming to work, and with that baggage, that personal baggage, she was bringing to the branch, due to which at times she used to lose her equanimity and shout at her colleagues or not get along with the colleagues. I told her I'll try to help her. And then I spoke to the branch manager without revealing the details and told her we need to ensure that she becomes part of the team because she's interested in becoming part of the team, but it's her personal problems that is creating an issue. The branch manager understood this. He had a conversation with his team. And what happens is during our in our setup, there used to be contests that used to happen wherein every month we had to sell some product. So that month we had a contest going on. The branch manager was a smart person. He made her the champion to run that contest. And believe me, she did it in such a good way that the team came together. And when the results were announced a month later, this team was the number one team in the entire country. All because this one girl decided her personal problems were not the branch's problem, and together they decided they would work as a team. That is something that gave me a lot of satisfaction. But I'd forgotten about this. About 6 months later, I received a friend request on Facebook, and it was the same lady who had reached out to me. And then she told me something that still stays with me. That single individual conversation that you had with me changed the rest of my life. And I want to thank you for that. I found profoundly satisfied with this. A small step that I took made a difference in somebody's life.
Well, that is so phenomenally profound. This just goes to show us that, a leadership is, and it's not just about numbers, about meeting targets. A little bit of empathy, support went such a long way in impacting her life and also positively impacting the bottom line for that branch. So those are some virtues that I believe, regardless of the industry, people overlook. But then eventually, we're all human beings. We all need support and help every now and then. So I guess extending that hand sure goes a long way. It's very profound, sir. Thank you for sharing that anecdote with us. I'm sure the listeners definitely would have identified with that. Um, Now you've also, sir, talked about uh, your deep involvement with communication development through something called Toastmasters. Could you tell us a little about Toastmasters, what that is?
Toastmasters is a global organization, not for profit organization, which helps people upgrade their speaking skills and presentation skills. I've been involved in this organization for a little less than 2 years, and it has had a great impact on me. One of the most important things is they give you feedback, and feedback is given in such a way that it doesn't destroy you. It just points out the shortcomings and the direction as to how it can be improved. Well, once after I gave a feedback to someone, that person came back and told me, this is the first time someone has told me as to how I sound when I speak. What happens is when we communicate or when we speak, there are a lot of things involved, but we are not aware as to how we connect with the audience, how we connect with the other person. In Toastmasters, that is one of the primary foundations on which it is worked, where feedback is given, constructive feedback is given, so that a person can improve over a period of time and become a better version of themselves. Because leadership grows when people learn to see themselves the way others experience them. That's what Toastmasters has done for me. And it's a great organization. And I sometimes wish I could have known about this or I could have joined Toastmasters when I was in my prime working life. That could have done a great deal of positive influence on my career path.
I'm sure it would. And I like how you say that, sir. Uh, it impacts how people experience you, not just perceive you, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, I'm just a little curious about how that experience, that entire, work or that stint with Toastmasters, what did that teach you about how communication can potentially shape the entire scope of leadership?
What happens is, as far as communication is concerned, the people just don't listen to the leader's words. They read their tone and composure. During a difficult phase in an organization, I remember addressing a large group. I did not mince words. I just put everything on the table and made them realize that we were not in a very good space. At the end of the conversation, I did not mention anything new, but the very fact that I laid everything on the table made people feel, though the problem had not gone, at least they knew that they learned how to feel steady. That's the power of communications. Sometimes clarity itself becomes a form of leadership.
Absolutely, yes. Clarity, that sure improves things, definitely. And of course, to improve clarity, you've got to have clear communication, and that could be one of the pillars of leadership. I couldn't agree more, sir. So, Mr. Premraj, as finance has been evolving, there's a lot of automation that's coming in. Now we have the advent of AI. So, technical skills in people, employees at all stages, they're kind of becoming more standardized. Everybody's just required to know everything. So, do you feel that, communication and the interpretation of that certain communication will become, to a certain extent, the defining edge for future leaders, what sets apart great leaders from your everyday average leader.
Yes, it will. What's going to happen in future is what I feel with the artificial intelligence and all these apps coming in. There will be a democratization as far as this is concerned.
Okay.
So the differentiating portion would be how a person relates or how a person communicates, because it is the leader who will be setting the emotional tone around this. And when everything is equal, your communication skills as to how you come across to people will be the defining moment, or will be something that will have an edge over the other things.
So, Mr. Premraj, we've been talking about communication and the interpretation that becomes absolutely imperative for leaders. Now, that brings me to a question. In today's world where uncertainty is so rampant and there's probably way too much information everywhere, how do you feel, sir, that communication changes the way leaders can and would handle pressure in situations that seem beyond control or just generally difficult situations?
Yes, that's a reality now, because one of the biggest myths that you can find about leadership success is defined by visibility and titles. But some of the finest leaders were ones who worked without shouting or having a loud voice. They are the ones who developed people, built systems, and created trust amongst people. So, leadership should not be judged by how high you rise, but in all this conflict, how much people you have developed in all this uncertainty that we are facing, how much people you have developed, and how these people will carry the organization forward. That is what I feel is essential in today's world.
Right. So, we've also talked about moving from anxiety to clarity more in the financial services industry. So, for leaders who today feel extremely overwhelmed by just sheer numbers and pressure, what mindset shift do you think becomes crucial for them to imbibe to be able to meet that kind of pressure and something that can actually help them the most?
The markets will always fluctuate, targets will change, crises will keep appearing unexpectedly. But when people trust their leader's judgment and integrity, they remain steady even in this uncertainty. Because in the long run, it is a trust that a person has in his people and in his leaders, in the leader, that will count in the final analysis. Trust, I believe, is what is fundamental for an organization to progress.
Do you have an anecdote, maybe a certain situation where the stakes were high, people were under pressure, and that's when people really look up to a leader and say, "You've got to show us the way forward," and maybe their integrity, the rootedness of that certain leader, is what brought the organization out of that lurch, out of that situation.
Yeah, I can think about one incident that happened. It was in the annual appraisal discussion. And I had a high flying person with whom I had to have this conversation because he did not perform that well during the year. And when he walked into the cabin for that appraisal discussion, I could see his shoulders were drooping. He was very, very defensive. He looked very defensive. He sounded very defensive. He was pensive. So open the conversation by asking him as to what is it that he felt did not fall in place for him this year. That single sentence changed the conversation. The person realized there would be no blame game. There would not be anything that would, I would say, that would hurt him. But he felt I genuinely wanted to know as to what went wrong during that year. And then we had that difficult conversation. We had a very polite conversation. We had a very conversation wherein we went through the entire year's performance without any rancor or dispute. And at the end of the conversation, he was also very happy that I gave it to him in a way that he did not feel defeated. In fact, he felt supported. And the next year, he was one of the star performers that we had. Once again, he relived his past glory after 1 year of setback. So this, I feel, was one of the great memories I have about developing people or having a difficult conversation which got turned around.
That's truly deep. So one can safely, a matter of fact, one can distinctly infer that leadership is more about empathy and understanding people's situation, their challenges on a more human and interpersonal level, as opposed to just making them drive towards a certain goal. After all, we're not machines, we're human beings connected to situations, and they're not always good. So I wanted to shift slightly into something more personal for you, more about identity and legacy. Now you're mentoring professionals, transitioning into second careers. So what's the biggest internal struggle that you are seeing people uh, face during that phase when they're transitioning from a certain job role, a certain industry, to a completely different one, maybe?
One, especially people who have spent a considerable period of time in an organization, when they move out, that title that they were carrying, some of the other, that they keep taking with themselves. They need to understand when they are transitioning, they could be starting from zero. Or if it's a second career, when after they have finished their active life and they are transitioning into a new phase in their lives, the past is the past. You should not harp on the past. You might have been uh, a great person, or you would have had a lot of titles, a lot of people reporting to you in the past. But when you start once again, you start on zero without that headweight of those titles. That is what will keep you grounded and ensure in the new phase of life that you are entering, you do a good job because you have this experience, and that experience needs to be translated into helping the organization where you're working, or if you are working with people, mentoring or coaching, that experience should come through without the headweight of titles or designations, because designations or titles are just that, just words. What is more important is how is it that you deal with people. You need to ensure that more people, you help people rise above themselves to create a better version of themselves with your guidance, with your coaching.
Right, absolutely. And do you feel that that's not only to an extent where they have to be humble and connect with other people, but also maybe start expecting less or from themselves, because a lot of people on a subconscious level may think that I've been a certain person in my previous role and I have to exhibit that in the new role despite the fact that I'm starting at ground zero. So do you feel that even one should maybe, just take a step back and say, hey, I'm just starting all over. So I can, I can be expected to fail, or it's okay to fail in certain things.
Yes, I agree with you. At times, failures are an opportunity, are stepping stones, wherein you can look back as to why is it that you did not succeed. I wouldn't call that failure. Look at it in the way that why is it that you did not succeed, and you will find there are things that you might not have done what was expected, might not have done correctly. So once you step back, analyze as to what went wrong, you will find there are lots and lots of lessons that can be learned, and these might be something new that a person could be learning in his in his own old vocation or his old job. He might have succeeded, but in a new setup these things might not work. And plus the world is moving so fast that things change, so one needs to be available to change one's mindset and imbibe new technologies, new ideas, which will help. So, looking back, stepping back, and looking from an overall angle is what will help a person to redefine themselves, is what I feel.
Absolutely. Just brings me or to memory a certain quote by Thomas Edison. When he couldn't really succeed at the light bulb, he went ahead and said that I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've just found 10,000 different ways that it doesn't work. Well,
True, very true.
regardless, it's a difficult place to navigate when a previous role has defined you so long. So, do you feel that reinvention uh, could possibly change people how they understand being a leader or how they define leadership itself?
Yes, to a certain extent, yes, because in their old organizations, they would have had a template for success. That template for success might work, or only some nuggets of that might work. Everything might not work in a new setup. So one needs to be available for changes to ensure that new ideas, you bring in new ideas, you talk to people. They will be the younger lot, especially the younger lot. They come with a lot of ideas. They are brimming with ideas, and they are tech savvy much more than the older generation. So if you can marry your experience with the wisdom that the younger generation brings forward, it could be a great success story.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm sure that that's a challenge almost everyone faces when switching roles and industries, and the collaboration with your experience, your wisdom, with the know-how of the younger generation could really, take them places. Well, let me ask you this: what is a common or most common misconception about leadership success? Something that you completely disagree with, that people think that this is what leadership success would ordinarily or look like, and that's something you completely disagree with.
So one of the misconceptions about leadership is it's all about titles and visibility.
Mhm.
In reality, leadership is about impact over a period of time. Many of the greatest leaders that I've seen were not the loudest voices in the room.
Correct.
They are the ones that set up organizations built on trust, developed people, and created sustainable systems. So let us not go by personal recognition, but by the strength of the teams and institutions that these people created.
Absolutely, I agree. I had the good fortune to work in General Electric back in the year 2001, and the chief executive at that time was a gentleman called Jack Welch, and he managed to get GE as the greatest wealth creator in the United States for 7 years in a row. And I remember his statement where he said, I don't care where the idea comes from. It could come from a janitor. And if it's feasible, I will implement. I will reward the guy. So, um, a great idea could come from any kind of mind. And definitely, leadership success, like you said, is not only titles and accolades and all that. And we at LoopLynks, we believe in that philosophy, and we talk about a legacy, not just as recognition, but as an impact that you've managed to create that far outlasts you and what you've done and continues beyond you. So when you think about your own journey, sir, how do you define leadership success today?
I can relate to a time when I was a branch manager in one of the branches, and we were having a problem wherein we could not handle the crowds that were coming in,
Okay.
and our front office staff was very, very pressurized. So during one of the meetings, I invited them to come up with solutions with some of the problems that the branch is facing. And within a couple of days, one of my front office team, they came with a solution to one of the problems we were facing. We implemented that solution in our branch. We reported to the controlling office, then in the entire region, and then this process was replicated across the country. And I'm proud to say this small thing that we did in the branch is now the standard operating practices in the banking sector in the country. Our small legacy to Indian banking. And that
Fantastic.
came from the lowest level of the hierarchy. People who were interacting with the customers on a daily basis. They knew the pulse of the
Exactly.
customers. And that's how we came upon this simple solution which got magnified and which made a great difference to customer service.
I can just about imagine the ripple effect it had,
Yes.
and judging by the fact that it's been implemented across. So that definitely is a great anecdote for leadership success. Do you also feel that, when you finally leave a certain organization, obviously everybody's accountable to be working and achieving goals, but what people perceive you as, and once you've left, what they talk about you and how they feel and how you've made them feel, if that's greatly positive, then one could say possibly that you've been a great leader.
Yes, I can say that because I have worked in different geographies and many of the people with whom I worked, see, even 30 years, 35 years ago, people are still in touch. They might be in different geographies, but whenever they come to the place where I reside now, not only do they call, they make an effort to come and meet. And this is not one or two people, many people with whom I've worked across geographies. This is happening. People have stayed in touch. They continue to be part of my life, and I am part of their lives. And I feel honored that they feel that I am good enough to be part of their lives. So that gives me a great satisfaction because while working, we were only working for 7, 8 hours. But after this, years and years later, 10, 15, 20 years later, if they can still feel I made a difference to their life, I feel honored and privileged.
Absolutely profound. Uh, Winning accolades, getting awards, well, that's fantastic. But winning hearts, now that's something else.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I completely, totally resonate with that. And sir, finally, if you could leave our audience with one belief about leadership, especially in complex environments, uh, especially in banking and finance, what would that one belief be about leadership?
I would say it's ultimately about balance, balancing numbers with people, balancing risks with courage, and balancing performance with integrity. Money will fluctuate, markets will change, but it is this trust, the balance and trust that one creates with employees that will remain for a lifetime.
Absolutely. And I guess that kind of spills over to the entire experience that customers also have. A happy
Yes.
team, I guess, makes a happy customer as well.
Yes.
Well, what clearly stands out from this conversation is a simple yet profound and yet overlooked truth that leadership is not just about making decisions, but also forecasting and understanding the impact that that certain decision will take. It's about seeing beyond just mere numbers and one could say staying steady under pressure, building trust that lasts a whole lot longer than normal everyday results possibly can. So, Mr. Premraj, thank you so very much for sharing your journey, your anecdotes, and your perspective above all with us. And to everyone listening, if this conversation has given you a fresh perspective on leadership, share it with someone who's struggling navigating your own path. So until next time, lead with clarity and build with responsibility. This is the LoopLynks Show. Thank you so very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.